A word of caution. This episode contains descriptions of sexual assault and murder. Please take care when listening. In May of 2002, a 23-year-old was sexually assaulted and murdered inside her apartment in Raleigh, North Carolina. Residents told police they had seen a suspicious man looking into her apartment window just weeks before the murder, but police had difficulty zeroing in on a suspect. When they did finally learn who was responsible, it was apparent he had murdered before and was likely planning to do it again in the near future. There is much to love about North and South Carolina, but the two states have also had their fair share of violent and senseless crimes over the years. From murders on the Blue Ridge Parkway, in the heart of big cities or sleepy college towns, and along the coastal waters, some of these stories may be new to you. Some may have happened in your town. Some may involve people that are still missing to this day. But all will leave you remembering to always be vigilant about the people you meet and the places you go. I'm Renee Robertson. Please join me for Missing in the Carolinas. Episode 126. A Stranger Was Watching. The Murder of Stephanie Bennett. January is National Stalking Awareness Month, and while the majority of victims know their stalker personally, whether it's an ex-partner, friend, family member, or colleague, there are also instances where a person is attacked, or in the most extreme cases, murdered by someone they had no idea was stalking them. This is what happened in the case of Raleigh resident Stephanie Bennett. In May 2002, residents at a North Raleigh apartment complex were shocked when they learned a 23-year-old young woman had been found dead in her unit. Stephanie Bennett had lived at the Bridgeport Apartments on Lake Lynn for a little more than a year, having moved to the area after graduating from Roanoke College in Virginia with a business degree. She went to high school in Rocky Mount, Virginia, where her classmates voted her Miss Personality during her senior year. Her parents said that although she was outgoing, she also liked to read, swim, and spend time on the lake in any water-related activity. While she only lived 45 minutes away from her hometown, she valued her independence and was thriving on her own. Stephanie lived in the apartment with her stepsister and best friend, Deanna Powell, who was also originally from Rocky Mount. Tragically, Deanna's father had unexpectedly died earlier that week, so she was out of town when Stephanie's murder occurred. Stephanie was working at Spherion Technology, which did contract work for IBM. When she didn't report to work on Tuesday, May 21st, concerned coworkers called Stephanie's family in Virginia and then asked for a welfare check with the Raleigh Police Department. When he heard about the murder, a neighbor from the complex, 41-year-old Richard Eberhardt, told police that he'd seen a suspicious individual crouched behind some bushes about 3 weeks prior, looking into a window. The next day, he checked the area again and realized you could see directly into Stephanie's apartment from that vantage point. He told Stephanie what he had seen and suggested she make sure her blinds were adjusted. He also told the News and Observer that Stephanie and her roommate Deanna were both shy but friendly young women who had never caused any issues in the apartment complex. According to Stephanie's friends and family, she had a serious boyfriend and was planning to relocate to another town to be with him. He was not in the area at the time of her murder and was quickly cleared as a suspect. In the early stages of the investigation, police were tight-lipped on Stephanie's manner of death, saying they wanted to preserve the integrity of the investigation. They did share that it was a homicide. They released a sketch of the man suspected to be the Peeping Tom outside of Stephanie and Deanna's apartment in the weeks before the murder. He was described as being of medium build and around 6 feet tall, wearing a hooded jacket in spite of the heat of the spring weather. Police also noted there had been a series of break-ins and sexual assaults in the northern and western areas of Raleigh in recent months, but weren't sure if those were related to Stephanie's death. On June 8, 2002, the Raleigh Police Department announced they had questioned and released a man who was arrested in May on 6 counts of peeping and 1 count of resisting arrest. The man was named Christopher Campen, and he had been caught looking into windows at the Governor's Point Apartments, which were located on the opposite side of Lake Lynn where Stephanie lived. A test of his DNA did not match evidence that hair and fiber samples police collected from Stephanie's apartment. In mid-June, Stephanie Bennett's autopsy report was released, detailing how the young woman was bound, sexually assaulted, and strangled, possibly with an electrical or telephone cord. Bruises all over her body indicated she had tried to fight off her attacker. Her killer also appeared to have stolen her JVC stereo from her bedroom. Police noted a screen was missing from one of her bedroom windows and was found on the ground outside the apartment. They theorized he may have entered and exited through that window. Police said they had compiled a list of people arrested in the prior 18 months on any sex charge and were contacting those people. Lieutenant Chris Morgan, who was the head of Raleigh's Major Crimes Unit at the time, told the public that the killer would likely appear quite normal. He went on to say, "The general profile is nothing like what you would imagine. It's a person who would live day to day and appear very normal. This could well be a person who does not stand out at all." As the weeks went on with no arrests and Stephanie's murder, many women in the community grew more fearful and stopped going out alone at night. Members of the police department met with a group of concerned citizens, mostly women, and offered safety tips. They told them to keep their heads up, look people in the eye as they passed them walking, and appear confident. They pointed out that walking with headphones on could put you at a greater risk. Lieutenant Morgan advised for them to drill pins into any lower-level windows so they couldn't be entirely opened, as well as inserting lock bars on sliding glass doors. In early July of 2002, a female student at NC State University reported that an intruder entered her bedroom in the early morning hour, threw something over her head, and proceeded to assault her. She fought back, and finally the intruder gave up and left the apartment. She was able to catch a glimpse of his face before he fled. Her apartment was near the Centennial campus of the university, and it appeared the intruder entered through an unlocked sliding glass door. He was described as a white male between 25 and 30, around 6'2", and weighing around 185 pounds. He had a muscular build, short hair, and was wearing a sleeveless muscle shirt and long dark pants. The police reported they were looking for the suspect and said any possible connection to Stephanie Bennett's murder would be explored. Before we continue, let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsors. It's wintertime. I don't know about you, but my skin is always in desperate need of moisture during this time of the year, and, well, all the other months of the year too. But I don't like to experiment with a lot of different products at high price points if they won't work for me. Enter the products from SkinX Erin. I use her Pre-Cleanse Oil, Hydrating Beauty Oil, and Perfecting Night Oil, and I was hooked from the first drop. The Pre-Cleanse gently removes dirt, impurities, and even waterproof makeup without tugging, all without stripping or drying out your skin. In addition to keeping your skin clear, it also helps your skin feel firmer and reduces the signs of aging. The Hydrating Beauty Oil is a powerful and effective skin hydrator that never leaves your skin feeling greasy. The signature squalene oil is known for its anti-inflammatory and anti-aging properties. It's perfect for treating skin conditions like acne and eczema and reducing the appearance of wrinkles. The Perfecting Night Oil is loaded with vitamins E and A and is rich with antioxidants and omegas that nourish skin, replenish elasticity, and reduce stretch marks. A few drops a day leave skin smoother, more vibrant, and youthful. Want to try out the products for yourself? Go to shopxerin.com and use the code MissingCarolinas10 for a 10% discount on your order. Are you looking to level up your writing or learn a new skill? Whether you focus on nonfiction or are more inclined to creative writing, or want to learn how to put together a digital portfolio of your writing, Wow Women on Writing can help. Interested in podcasting? Check out a digital course I created called You Can Start a Podcast. During this pre-recorded webinar, you will learn the benefits of creating your own podcast, materials you need to get started, how to develop content that will keep listeners coming back for more, and ways your podcast can create supplemental income. I'll share examples of different types of podcasts, how to decide on a format, ways to handle the technology necessary for creating a podcast, how to develop your first few episodes, promotion and monetization ideas, and ways you can repurpose your podcast content. All written materials and resources are provided by me. I'll also give you a handout with information discussed in the webinar, along with suggestions for a few different types of podcasts to explore. Best of all, this webinar only costs $30. You can find it by going to wow-womenonwriting.com and clicking on the Classroom tab. I'll also post a link in the show notes. And now, let's get back to the show. 2 years passed, and Stephanie's murder remained unsolved. Then, in November 2004, new detectives Ken Copeland and Jackie Taylor, decided to take another look at the case, and they essentially started from scratch. They first returned to the Lake Glen area and re-interviewed the people in the apartment complex who had been questioned in May of 2002, focusing on the Peeping Tom angle. A number of tips led them to Snipe Creek Lane in the Dominion at Lake Glen apartments, which was an area not far from Stephanie Bennett's. There, they learned a man fitting the initial description of the person looking into Stephanie's window would often be seen walking a large Rottweiler and wearing a hooded sweatshirt. They narrowed down their list of suspects until they got to one name, 35-year-old Drew Planton. They could not cross him off their list, and according to an episode of Forensic Files, they tailed him to try and get DNA from any items he discarded in public. However, he seemed to know he was being followed, and at one restaurant, ordered only finger foods, asked for a straw with his drink, and took the straw with him when he left. The detectives approached his employer and asked if they could obtain items he used at work in order to get a DNA sample. The employer agreed. The DNA collected turned out to be a match with the DNA they had from Stephanie's body, and he was arrested on October 19, 2005. 2 years earlier, Planton had moved from the Dominion at Lakeland Apartments to another complex in West Raleigh. Planton had a job working in a lab at the North Carolina Department of Agriculture, where he tested the quality of commercial fertilizer. His coworkers described him as quiet, but were stunned after he was arrested. When he was arrested, he refused to speak to police and would not look up for his police photo. He wouldn't speak with his attorney. Police strapped him to a gurney chair on wheels for his arraignment. Planton was described by coworkers and those he came into contact with as a loner who drove an old Camaro and walked his Rottweiler Zane at night. He did not speak with most of his neighbors. He had moved to Raleigh from Michigan for his job at the state lab in 2000. He had an older brother who also lived in North Carolina by that time. An interesting fact is that in 2003, his brother was charged with 4 counts of secret peeping after he was caught videotaping women in a workplace restroom. Investigators believed he placed video surveillance in the restroom of an engineering firm on Patton Avenue in Asheville. However, one female neighbor did say she had a disturbing encounter with Planton. She told the News and Observer that one night she was unloading groceries from her car when she turned around and saw the man standing silently behind her. He had his hand on her car door and asked her if she lived with someone. She told him she lived in the apartment with her husband, but he tried several other times to strike up a conversation with her when he saw her at the complex. At the time of Stephanie's murder, Planton lived nearby and could access her apartment through a short, wooded path. Planton's mother, Sarah Chandler, who still lived in Michigan at the time of his arrest, told people he was a painfully shy young man who, growing up, had enjoyed science and animals, but had few friends. He commuted to school at Michigan State University and earned a degree in zoology. Planton had trouble finding work until he was offered the job with the agricultural department. He seemed to know police were closing in on him because he drew up a will before his arrest and asked if his mother would take care of his dog if something happened to him. Wake County prosecutors announced they would seek the death penalty against Drew Planton for the murder and rape of Stephanie Bennett. During a search of his apartment, investigators found an extensive collection of pornography, 12 firearms, handcuffs, and dozens of knives. They also found evidence that led them to believe Planton was stalking another potential victim nearby. He had bank statements and documents from Stephanie Bennett's college loans in his apartment, along with newspaper clippings about her murder. Even more shocking, they discovered documents that mentioned a Michigan woman named Rebecca Hussman. In 1999, the young woman was working 2 jobs to earn money for college and pay for her upcoming wedding. One of those jobs was at an adult nightclub where she was a topless dancer. Her family said she didn't enjoy the work and was only doing it to make some extra money, but she always had a club employee walk her to the parking lot. On the night she was killed, she drove home around 2 a.m., and when her fiancé woke up at 6 a.m. and learned she wasn't in the apartment, he found her deceased in the parking lot near her car. She had been shot. Her fiancé was cleared as a suspect, and no one had any idea who would have wanted Rebecca Huseman dead. Planton had two .45 caliber guns in his possession, and Michigan investigators obtained them and reopened Rebecca's unsolved case. Ballistics testing later matched the bullet that killed Rebecca with Planton's gun. It didn't appear Planton knew Rebecca personally. Was she another woman he had stalked and followed home that night? Had he approached her at her car, and when she rejected him, he shot her? That question remains unanswered, but if he hadn't been arrested in Stephanie Bennett's murder, Rebecca's loved ones might still be waiting for an answer as to who killed her. When Planton first arrived at Central Prison in Raleigh, he received 4 infractions for not cooperating with prison officers. He received 60 days of disciplinary punishment, which meant he was isolated in his cell for 23 hours a day, with 1 hour a day free for recreation and a shower. At the end of October 2005, prison officials removed Planton from suicide watch. A prison psychiatrist and other mental health employees believed he was no longer a suicide risk. On January 2, 2006, Drew Planton took his life while incarcerated at Central Prison. He left no note behind. His mother, Sarah Chandler, later sued the state of North Carolina, claiming it failed to protect her son while he was being incarcerated. A State Bureau of Investigation inquiry found no evidence of foul play and determined correctional officers could not have stopped him. Chandler disagreed. She said her son had suffered an acute stress reaction after his arrest, was catatonic, and placed in solitary confinement. She alleged his condition deteriorated because he did not get consistent mental health counseling. The state immediately filed a motion to dismiss the lawsuit, but I was unable to determine what the final outcome was. Sarah Chandler died in Michigan in 2023. In 2004, Stephanie's father, Carmen Bennett, initially sued the owner of Stephanie's apartment complex in the years following her murder. He claimed Equity Residential, based out of Chicago, failed to inform residents of a peeping Tom on the property. His daughter's window had failed to lock properly. Lighting around the building was inadequate, and the shrubbery was too high around the windows. He eventually dropped the civil suit. After her death, Stephanie's family established a scholarship fund in her memory, offering students at Franklin County High School with plans to attend Roanoke College the opportunity to receive a $7,500 scholarship. On May 30, 2002, before Drew Planton's arrest, a columnist for the News and Observer named Ruth Sheehan pinpointed why Stephanie Bennett's murder was so alarming, especially for women living alone. He wrote, in part, "At this point, police believe Bennett's killer was a stranger to her, a rarity among murders, a reminder that even when we can rationalize away such terrors in our own insular lives, they are never truly absent. Bennett's death is a reminder that, even though our safety precautions may not be enough, the deadbolt on the door, the locked window, the pulled drapes, or drawn blinds, they are all we have. They are the only things we control in an equation we would prefer not to face. It's easy, even at my age, to neglect the most basic elements of safety sometimes, to think, no need, to get careless. From what police have said, Stephanie Renee Bennett was not negligent. She did nothing to invite this, but her death is a reminder that our vigilance is all we have. Vigilance is our only hope. Too often, it's true, the danger that truly threatens is one that we already know. We read those stories all too frequently. Woman killed, boyfriend, husband, ex, in custody. But sometimes, however rarely, the danger is one we do not know, a danger we hate to even imagine, described in a medical examiner's report." And that's the end of what she wrote in her column. One of the things that struck me as I was researching this case was how many articles were published about Drew Planton. His mother was an attorney, and I believe she strategically participated in interviews with the press in the hopes of swaying the public opinion of her son. The bottom line is, there was physical evidence that Drew Planton murdered Stephanie Bennett and Rebecca Husman in his apartment. He would most likely have been found guilty of his crimes. I wish there had been more articles about Stephanie Bennett and what kind of a person she was, rather than the focus on Drew Planton's abusive biological father, his parents' divorce, and the fact that he refused to speak to anyone after his arrest. I relied heavily on reporting conducted by WRAL and the News and Observer in Raleigh for this episode. For a full list of resources, visit the show notes at missinginthecarolinas.com. Stalking impacts 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 men in the United States. If you are a victim of stalking and fear you are in imminent danger, please call 911 immediately. To learn about other resources available to you, visit Stalking Prevention Awareness and Resource Center, or SPARC, at stalkingawareness.org. This brings us to the conclusion of this episode of Missing in the Carolinas. If you enjoyed this episode, please do me a favor and give it a 5-star rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you'd also like to support the show in a small way, you can buy me a coffee over at buymeacoffee.com, Renee Robertson. Thank you so much for those who have already supported me through this platform. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, so please like our pages and get started on a discussion of the missing people profiled on the show. Do you know of a missing persons case in North or South Carolina that you think should be covered? Email me at missinginthecarolinas@gmail.com with any details you can share. Cover art for this podcast was designed by Macintosh Multimedia. Sound editing is provided by Daniel Robertson. Thanks so much for listening.